Willis and Chris, I'm sorry. I'm going to have y'all mute just for a minute for the echo. Welcome, everybody, tonight to our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion live discussion. I am Julie Benoit. I currently serve in the role as Alumni and Parent Relations Coordinator for the school. I also am the proud parent of 2 Highlanders, class of 2024 and 2027. I am very pleased to be joined by Willis Ware as well. Willis is the school's Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and he is starting his 17th year here at Heathwood. He has served as the school's Director of Community Relations for the past 16 years. He is also on our upper school faculty and is the head coach for girls track cross country. His daughter Lydia is an alumni, class of 2009, and also of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, class of 2013. So thank you, Willis, for joining us. We also have tonight with us Chris Hinchey, our head of school. He is entering his 8th year at Heathwood with us, 6th year as the head of school. He has 3 boys, is also the proud father. They're in the classes of 2022, 25, and 27. He is also certainly our fearless leader in thoughtful planning and forward thinking here at Heathwood. Thank you to all our alumni for taking the time to join us tonight. We appreciate you, and we look forward to sharing lots of great information. I wanted to also just take a quick moment to thank Brianna Dickerson Zimmerman, class of 2005. She has returned to us at Heathwood as an associate in the development office, the events coordinator, and the head girls basketball coach. Thank you for helping arrange this conversation tonight. She is an integral part of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee here on campus. The purpose of our time together tonight is just to engage with all of our alumni to further the connection that our alumni and Heathwood have together by sharing with you all the work that Heathwood is doing and has been doing to address the issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion on our campus with our students as well as throughout our community. So thank you for taking the time to submit all your questions to Brianna. We have lots of information to cover, and I thought maybe we could start with Chris and Willis, who have both deeply been involved in leading and coordinating Heathwood's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives over the past several years with a more increased focus this past year. I'd like to maybe just start by beginning to hear from each of you sort of about what Heathwood has been doing, our recent initiatives, and some of the goals for DEI on our campus. Chris, do you want to start? Sorry, I made you mute. Now you'll have to unmute.
Yeah. Just say that all over again. So I want to welcome everyone who's joining us. I want to thank Julie and the development office for organizing this and pulling this together, and for all of you for carving out time tonight. I want to tell you a little bit about kind of where we are right now, and then hand things off to Willis to add some granularity, and then would love to answer some questions. I do want to thank you, Julie, for the introduction of a fearless leader. Which means things are really going badly in the world when anyone calls you a fearless leader. So we are certainly in interesting times, and a large percentage of our time, at least for the past couple of months, has been centered on COVID discussions. And for those of you who've been following us, we opened up school about 8 days ago with students on campus, and things are going well. Our planning is paying off. Though the virus is making the rounds in the Columbia community, and we are keeping an eye on its progression. About 8 months ago, Willis and I started having some discussions about kind of just the changing landscape for independent schools and kind of our desire to move forward in a bolder way. At the time that Willis and I had the conversation, Willis was wearing many hats. He was teaching close to a full load in the upper school, was the head coach of two varsity teams, two very successful varsity teams, was running aspects of our community service program. In a non-COVID year, would have been helping to steward and shepherd us through the Johns Island Service Project at the end of the year, and was also tasked with leading our diversity efforts. And, any of those alone would be a tall task. And so as Willis and I began to identify what the next step looked like, it was really kind of carving away some aspects of the heavy load he was carrying and really working to craft a new job description for diversity, equity, and inclusion at Heathwood. One of the things that we had the benefit of was that Heathwood has had a long history in this arena, and Willis has had a long tenure at Heathwood. So there was a lot of institutional wisdom. Through the course of the winter, we crafted a new job description and finished it just before we broke from campus on March 16th. And then Willis and I were able to stay in touch during that break away from campus. And as the summer progressed and we began to feel some confidence that we would be opening again, we really were able to step forward. We kind of endorsed our summer reading by the faculty as an exercise in broadening the perspective of our faculty so they could engage more of our students in a deeper way. And then when we came back on campus, we were able to organize a series of book talks that furthered the discussion and I think allowed us to step into a more uncomfortable space to challenge some of our assumption and begin enacting aspects of our strategic plan, at least as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. I have much more to say, but at that point I'd like to turn it over to Willis to maybe pick up from there and add some granularity to the efforts of the last 2 months or so. Willis.
Yes. So I'm super excited about our focus on our diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And as Chris mentioned, one of the very first things that we did was to put together a committee that would work with me in helping to lead the institution in our diversity, inclusion, and equity work. And we have a fantastic group that we've pulled together that has already provided us with some great insight. And so we'll continue to work with that group. And one of the things that we'll be doing very soon is a school-wide climate survey. We're working with the National Association of Independent Schools, and we'll be doing a survey that will provide an opportunity for all of our constituents to give us their impressions of the school, their experiences of the school. And so that survey will be sent out, we're hoping in early October. Prior to that, at the end of September, we're going to have some focus groups with parents, faculty members, alums, board members, admin, and the focus groups, and working with them, it will allow us to work with NAIS and putting together some questions that will help us to really get a feel for where the school is at. In addition to the climate survey, which will help drive our work in the future, we're excited about some of the initiatives with our students. We realize that any school that is doing good work in diversity, equity, and inclusion is first and foremost providing students with an opportunity to engage in dialogue. And so both in the classroom, we've already actually began having some discussions in some of our classrooms around DEI work. But then also we're going to have some clubs. We'll be having continuing really our Accept Club, which is our diversity club in the upper school. We'll be starting an Accept Club in both the middle school and the lower school, which will allow students opportunities to have dialogue in a safe place. And then we're going to have affinity groups that we'll be starting, which we've never done in the school. And so I'm excited about some affinity groups that we'll be starting this school year that will also give students an opportunity to have some dialogue and to be able to talk about things that are important to them and their success here at Heathwood Hall. Another key ingredient in this work that we will be beginning here shortly is really looking at our curriculum. We recognize and have gotten some great feedback that one of the things that we've got to focus on is making sure that our curriculum really helps tell a story that will help us understand some of the social economic divide that we see in our greater society and that we certainly see here in Columbia and in the state of South Carolina. Some of the history lessons that have not been told or not been told well. And so we're wanting to look in the curriculum to make sure that that we're doing the best job possible in helping our students really understand some of the challenges that we're facing as a nation and that we're facing as a community. And so our curriculum review will begin in the preschool and run all the way up through the upper school. So in each of the divisions, we'll be taking a close look at curriculum and looking for ways that we can create a more robust curriculum in this particular work.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Willis. So,
Look, Julie, you're muted.
oh, sorry, I apologize. Thank you both. One of the questions that continued to come up from several alumni that sent in was around just helping students understand the socioeconomic status and ethnicity and just sort of how that contributes to privilege and power, and specifically more asking how we're supporting some of the lower income families besides tuition assistance at Heathwood, and how we're also recruiting families that don't look like maybe what people might think the typical Heathwood family looks like. So could either of you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. So let me address kind of an aspect of that. You know, as we have looked at our curriculum, I think we have been cognizant that at different divisions, this examination is going to feel different, and the execution of this is going to feel different on the other end. And I'll give you two examples of areas where we've been reflective and have tried to step forward. About 2 years ago, we developed a program in the fourth grade around a curriculum called Why America's Free. And it was based on the kind of colonial experience, and it was interactive, and the culminating event of this kind of, I thought, very strong curriculum was kind of an experiential learning day that where students spent some time in Camden. My son actually was a fourth grader at the time that we first utilized this curriculum. And in many ways, we had kind of great responses. There was a lot about the curriculum that was rich. The culminating experience was kind of a period dress-up day at the Siebel's house, which is a historic house in Columbia, in a section of Columbia where at one time there had been a kind of plethora of kind of very architecturally diverse houses, but in a plantation section of the city. And I think one of the pushbacks we got from some of our African American families is that we had not fully considered what it felt like to be at the enactment. And so after receiving that feedback, in some cases through some email exchanges with some families, and in another case through some very helpful phone calls, we utilized a focus group of some families who had been through that experience to ask them if they could share candidly their observations. And it was a very healthy conversation. For some of our families, it was an emotional conversation in which where they kind of dinged us was kind of a lack of awareness of, obviously, at that moment in time, America was not free for African Americans or some of the indigenous people who had lived in South Carolina. The other thing is that we had not necessarily addressed some of the kind of deeper, more difficult discussions about history and the colonial period. And so with that conversation, we were able to kind of utilize that and move forward with some change for the Patriots Day celebration and curriculum the next year, and then followed up with many of our families who felt that the curriculum had, for a fourth grader, had appropriately stepped into some more difficult conversations, and that the reenactment day, because those conversations had come up, didn't feel as if it was kind of not authentic, that we were kind of avoiding this difficult conversation. Another example would be a conversation that occurred between me, Dr. Scouten, our upper school head, and Sarah Burrows, as we've looked to develop a kind of Columbia-specific history class that really looks at how geography, business, aspects of segregation and Jim Crow have impacted the development of the city of Columbia. Areas such as Wheeler Hill development, the kind of south side of the USC campus that was built in an area that was previously an African-American community that was displaced, whether it's the swamps that were in 5 Points, whether it's the Bull Street. So it wasn't specifically just about Jim Crow and segregation, but looking at the evolution of a city and realizing how complex it was, and that many southern cities have been impacted in their development, intentionally and unintentionally, by aspects of segregation and Jim Crow. So as Willis and I have talked with the division heads, in the upper school, that examination can be deep and nuanced. And in the middle school, as we move into students who think more concretely and are not necessarily able to synthesize at a complex level, we have to really be careful about what we're introducing, because many of the adults that are listening right now tonight know that these are nuanced conversations for adults that our country is struggling with. They're very difficult and hard to frame for someone who's 8, 10, and 14. But what we've heard from our African American families is they are eager to participate if we give a heads up to either our white families or African American families. Many families are eager to use our teachings as a springboard for maybe a more nuanced conversation at the dinner table. Willis?
Yeah, I was going to add, as we think about social economics and some of the social economic disparities, one of the ways that we've addressed that in the classroom is through our multicultural studies class, where we spend time. There's a unit that we spend on social class, and in that unit, we look at education. We look at job, income, and the creation of wealth, and the influence of those 4 social class components on race and ethnicity, and how race and ethnicity impacts one's experiences in education, as well as job, income, and again, wealth creation. And so we've had some really interesting discussions with the students in that particular course. We've talked in that class, for example, it always comes up, the idea of the establishment of quote unquote white flight schools in the state of South Carolina and other parts of the state, and why those schools were created, and then the impact of that separation in the lives of thousands of families and thousands of students. And so in the classroom, we want to continue to have those discussions, not only in that particular course of multicultural studies, but in other classes as well, because we want our students to have an understanding, or at least begin to get an understanding as to why we have some of these social economic divides in our country currently.
And I want to jump in and add one more thing. I think as the division heads and other administrators at the school examined what moving forward would look like, and then coupling that with some conversations we've had with alums, one of the things that alums identified as an area where Heathwood could most move forward is to broaden the perspective of the adults in our community that are faculty. And so that really was some of that conversation helped to confirm and validate the need for us to do the summer read and to present faculty with some challenging books that would help them really examine some of their perspectives and assumptions. So as we read Blind Spot, Waking Up White, White Fragility, Bakari Sellers' memoir, My Vanishing Country, or Why Do All the Black Kids Eat in the Cafeteria Together? These were all books that would kind of present a different perspective and challenge some of their long-held assumptions that might then allow them to approach their classes differently. And certainly where we think we can most approach classes differently is in history and social studies. And so that's where some of our first examination, but we've also learned from this that narratives have been a very powerful vehicle for faculty to examine kind of their views and perspectives. So one of the things we did at faculty that came out of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee was to present three narratives. One was from an alum, Shelton Blue. Another was an alum, Brianna Dickerson Zimmerman. And then another was from a Heathwood parent, presenting some of their narratives on experiences that kind of were either jarring, were maybe not as we thought they would be, or forced them to re-examine some of their perspectives. And the faculty after spoke to us and said they are really eager to hear more of those narratives. Another example would be Asia Wilson's essay that she wrote. While we are very proud of what a great school Heathwood is, it was helpful maybe for our faculty, for me to hear that there were moments of that experience that were not as rosy, and that is the experience of many African Americans, that while maybe 90% of that experience was good, there were moments that felt as if they were treated differently. And so that's an area for us to grow and kind of examine the Heathwood curriculum, the Heathwood experience, and the professional development of our faculty.
And I would add, in just talking with many of our faculty members after we did the summer readings and then had the book talks during in-service, I had many faculty members who communicated an appreciation for not only the book reading, but then having a chance in small groups to have a discussion, and have asked, will this continue? Will we continue to provide opportunities for our faculty to be exposed to some experiences that they may not be used to? And of course, we will continue to look for ways and create opportunities for our faculty to remain engaged.
Well, and I'd like to just add to that as well, just how much I appreciated taking part in that, and many conversations with Willis, whose office is across from me, and just working as a team together. Our alumni council having several subcommittees, one of which is the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee, that of course is a large umbrella, but that we're going to be working closely with all of our alumni to hear more of those narratives and more of your experiences, to sort of formulate the things that we need to really be focusing on to continue to be connected to you all and to move the school forward and to really broaden our perspectives.
Now, Julie, there was a question in there that we have not answered. In the first question, you answered about looking at areas, or I guess for lack of a better term, recruiting students from either underserved areas or new areas. Typically, Heathwood admissions really kind of 2 or 3 funnels have kind of brought students to us. I think word of mouth from our families, which we know that would tend to reinforce the population that we already have, based on people maybe self-segregating amongst socioeconomic groups, professional groups, or sometimes through their church, which in many cases in South Carolina, many of those groups could feel segregated. So that would not necessarily move us forward in diversity. We also see a lot of new traffic through athletics, whether someone's a lacrosse player, a runner, a football player, a baseball player, soccer. Heathwood has a rich history of strong athletics, and we have strong coaches. And we realize our job through athletics is a co-curricular option to help build young people and to recognize their passions, interests, dedication, and commitment. I think we have a new director of enrollment management, Suzanne Nagy, who for the last 4 years has been the middle school head. One of her charges, as she really just took over the helm this summer, is to look for new areas to recruit students. Where are those areas in the Midlands where families would be intrigued by a Heathwood experience? Those could be areas in West Columbia, Lexington, the Northeast. We already draw a number of students from Orangeburg, if I think of the furthest distance we draw students away from. But there are also areas within Columbia that we have not necessarily examined. So Suzanne is looking at that through both a boosting of enrollment in general and also a program specifically focused on our diversity percentages and being a more diverse school socioeconomically, racially, and through a number of other lenses so that we can build our school from the lower grades up and have students, ideally, when we have students for a decade, their academic experience is richer and they're often able to kind of get more out of their upper school experience. So some of that's in the works. I don't necessarily have anything to report on that at the moment, but knowing Suzanne Nagy, I'll have something to report on in the next few months.
So, Chris and Willis, maybe for our alumni, what would be sort of like the best or maybe a couple of talking points as they're out in the community and have questions, specifically maybe from prospective families that are looking at Heathwood just in regards to how we handle diversity and the initiatives and goals that we have in place?
Will, so I'm going to let you tap your 17 years of experience here.
Okay. There's a couple of things that come to mind. I think one is the fact that we have I think a strong community. I think we do a good job, and we're always looking for ways that we can do a better job of supporting our students and providing support academically. We recognize that students have various learning styles, and so looking for ways that we can sort of meet kids where they are, and then help them figure out what their gifts and talents are, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and then supporting them on the journey, whether that journey begins in preschool or whether it begins in ninth grade, really supporting them all the way through graduation. And so I think one talking point would be just a support, a commitment to really supporting our students academically. But then in addition to that, I think the social support through clubs, extracurriculars, sports, the arts, providing students with opportunities, again, to use their gifts and their talents, and recognizing that in using those talents, again, whether it's in a play or whether it's in an athletic event or community service experience off campus, that often through those experiences come connections and bonds that we hope will help students to be successful. I also think one of the things that I want to see us do more, and I know the committee and our school administration wants to see more of, and that is our students having what many call courageous conversations, conversations that may be uncomfortable, but they're real life conversations, be it related to gender or religion, race, ethnicity, social class, sexual orientation. It's a number of different areas that we as adults find difficult to engage in, but realizing that especially our older students, our high school or upper school students, giving them some opportunities, again, in safe places to engage in some courageous conversations that we think will get them thinking on a deeper level and will hopefully serve them well as they graduate from Heathwood and move on to college and beyond. I also think one of the things that's been great for us and that we want to see progress in is when we look at our diversity at the school. Currently, we stand at about 20% of our students in the school are African American students. If we look more broadly at our diversity numbers to include our students who are Asian, Hispanic, and our international students, that number is closer to 25%, 24+%. And so with independent schools in the southeastern United States, and particularly in South Carolina, I think those numbers are good. We want to see those numbers grow. We want to see those numbers continue to increase. And I think with Suzanne and the admissions office initiatives and the initiatives of our diversity committee, I think we'll be able to see those numbers really blossom in the upcoming months and years.
And I think that's a great summation of the talking points. Just to add a couple things. One, we are an Episcopal school, and we have an Episcopally ordained chaplain, and at the foundation of our school as an Episcopal school is, seeing the kind of dignity of every human being and kind of seeing the grace of God in every human being. And I think that allows us to approach these discussions from a place of understanding, from a place of being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and treat others as you would want to be treated. We're also a school with a counselor in each division who I think is eager to engage with students, who recognize that students are in many ways growing up in a very difficult time. It's hard to unplug. They're constantly kind of worried about how they're being seen and what the perception of them is through either their own person or through social media. And I think the efforts of Stacy Gross, Elizabeth Grove, and Jenny Holder, all who are Heathwood alums, all who kind of have the kind of Highlander DNA and appreciate this feeling, the kind of that a soulful school like Heathwood has. The thing that most resonates with me, I think that Heathwood in its DNA is a school that seeks to be excellent. And I think that allows us to reflect on how we're doing. I think when a school, and I have been at schools around the country, I think when schools are looking to win, to be the best, I think it's harder to reflect, because anytime you're reflecting, that may feel like failure. And so, I enjoy the fact that I work with colleagues who I think can take a look. We can reflect on Patriots Day, for example, a program for which much work went into. And in many ways, it was a huge step forward for us. The curriculum was so much more robust, and the student experience in many ways was exceptional. And so for us to have the courage to kind of question whether that really was a good experience for everybody, and to hear that feedback was in some ways difficult, right? It challenged lots of hard work. And think about how much harder it is to challenge decades and centuries of thinking as we're being called upon now, given the dialogue in this country. Those are difficult discussions. In some ways, you have to either admit that your assumptions have been wrong, grieve whatever it is that you're grieving that may have been lost. Heathwood is well positioned to have those discussions. So I feel proud to be at a school where we welcome those conversations.
Absolutely. Just to add a second piece of that, not only our student demographics, but also the diversity of our faculty. Do y'all just speak to a little bit of the efforts I know that are also going into really looking at our diverse faculty that we have?
So, and I'll hand this off to Willis in a moment. One of the things that we've made a huge commitment recently at the board level is to increase the diversity of our board of trustees, and have made huge steps in the last couple of years under the leadership of, first, at least during my tenure as the head, under Julie Hicks, who then handed off the boardship to Rox Pollard, who is now handed it off to Margaret Wilcox. And there has been a commitment to the board diversity increasing, which was part of our strategic plan. And then more recently, though we've always had this commitment, we have made a more kind of holistic commitment to a more diverse faculty. And actually in the last year or so have been more successful. That's always one of the challenges for independent schools, is while they can make great efforts, oftentimes many of the faculty that you're recruiting look at your school and wonder if they should be at a place with students that look more like them. Could I make more of a difference somewhere else? Are you the school that I can make the most difference? But I do think that meeting some of our faculty, I think recently, meeting an Andrew Richardson, a Jay Spearman, a Willis, a Brianna, and then some of our faculty who we've more recently welcomed, meeting any of them would be a huge advertisement for the quality of faculty we have, but the fact that Heathwood is committed to creating a diverse faculty staff such that you're better able to engage with a broader range of our students. And Willis, I'll hand that off to you.
Yeah. So as we look to continue to increase the diversity of our faculty and staff, there's several different avenues that we'll use. In independent schools, Carney Sando is one of the agencies that's often tapped into in terms of looking for faculty just in general. And so we'll continue to work with organizations like Carney Sando, working with our HBCUs to look and identify students who are interested or would be interested in working at an independent school, and particularly here, obviously, at Heathwood. And then also just word of mouth, as is the case when we look at just recruiting students. When we have adults, parents, other faculty members who identify and talk to people, I know that there are many educators, African-American educators and others who aren't familiar with independent schools and would never consider independent schools. But then when you have a conversation with them and they begin to get an understanding as to what a school like Heathwood's environment is like and the opportunities that are provided, been working with smaller classrooms, working in a school where there is a sense of community, people's eyes are opened. And so we want to tap into just connections with parents, alums. If you know of educators, people in the field of education who would be interested or would consider working at Heathwood Hall, please let us know, because we certainly want to tap into a multitude of different sources to help us increase our faculty and staff diversity.
And I think also, just to add to that, from an executive level on our alumni council, just looking at the diversity of our council so we can continue to have those, as Willis said, courageous conversations and hear about past experiences and ways in which our alumni want to move Heathwood forward, and all the things that we love about the school, and the things that we also need to reflect on, as Chris has said, and really figure out what we need to change. I want to just shift at this time just a little bit to a different topic, still under the DEI umbrella, but with a question that was submitted in regards to Heathwood's support of students that may have learning differences or need a little extra academic support. Chris, would you maybe talk a little bit about the services that we provide at Heathwood to do that?
Right. So Heathwood is a school that takes a wide variety of learners. I think one of the things I've learned in my time in education that school for some students can feel very challenging, though they have many gifts, and many years later will return kind of sharing how they've kind of see those gifts come to fruition. And we'll often talk about at Heathwood and some of the other schools that were very similar to Heathwood, that the support of adults, the fact that people believed in them, and the fact that they were kind of given some support to get through those aspects of school that were more difficult, so they could get to those areas that they were passionate about, and oftentimes allowed them to learn kind of habits of the mind and kind of skills that would allow them to overcome some of those areas that were weakness. So when a student comes to us, let's say through the admissions process, oftentimes we'll get a folder. And we very often, if we perceive that this student may need some support, we'll either forward that to our kind of learning specialist in the middle upper school, whose name is Trip Garrick, who works in our Academic Achievement Center, or we might also utilize our Transition Center, which is a program that services students in the lower school who might need more support. A reading of those folders, oftentimes those folders may come with what's called psych ed testing, which will be kind of these robust 10 to 30 page reports that will allow us to get an indication as to our ability to support that child. In some cases, we might recommend that a child with more significant learning disabilities might pursue a school that's better suited, and maybe that's the student would then be ready for us later in middle school. Sandhills is a school that does an excellent job kind of preparing students to transition into a mainstream school like Heathwood, and we've had a number of success stories. There are certainly other kind of more kind of boarding schools around this country that might service students, and there are certainly many great programs operating out of public schools. But if a family comes to us and that student has needs, if the transition center in the lower school or the AAC in the middle and upper school feels as if they can either provide support through, I would call, accommodations that we can meet. So oftentimes students will come with a series of recommendations made through a psych ed testing. We will have to discern which of those recommendations we are able to accommodate. So unlike a public school, there are times that we may say we are unable to provide the support that this student needs. But when we determine that we can provide the support, which may be through kind of different learning modules or techniques, it may be through support in the Academic Achievement Center, it may be through intervention with grade teams, working with the parents and looking at summer tutoring, or kind of push in and push out during the day in the lower school, we're often able to support students. And sometimes students who need our support in the lower grades are able to kind of graduate from that support and kind of finish off their high school career without that support. But I've had the luxury now, this is my 30th year in schools, to see so many students return to the school after maybe struggling through aspects of traditional school, which recognize, working memory, writing skills, and the ability to kind of synthesize large amounts of information. There are so many other skills that equate to success in this world that if we can give students the tools, and the Academic Achievement Center in transition gives them those tools, or small classes and our academic support within the division give those students those tools, they're often able to be very successful. But it really is a multi-tiered approach, though we don't necessarily follow the same model of having a kind of more structured, formalized IEP or a 504. That would be a public school model. And I know someone asked a question about that. We often determine, can we provide the support that this particular student deserves and needs? And if we can't, we often encourage the family to look elsewhere. And if we can, we develop kind of our own learning plan through communication with the Academic Achievement Center and the teachers, but it looks a little different than a public school support system.
Thank you. Willis, would you have anything to add to that?
No, just get back. It just kind of gets back to the point that I made earlier, and that's that when students start at Heathwood, there is a commitment that we're making to their success, and we're recognizing that that success is going to come. It's going to look different depending on a student's strengths and weaknesses, and so. From the Academic Achievement Center to the division administrators, working and partnering with parents, that it's all hands on deck approach to helping the kids be successful.
And there are two pieces that ground my thinking relative to Heathwood. One was reading some of the original documents of Susan Gibbs Robinson founding the school, and there's some language in her kind of the paragraph that is really the nugget for the origins of the school, and it's that she wanted to develop a school that could welcome all learners, and so to me that's always a kind of grounding thought and phrase. And then I've had the luxury of getting to know Bob Shirley as he has reached out during my tenure here and been very supportive, and I think Bob, who was kind of an educational innovator, really was looking to create a school where there were lots of educational experiences that weren't necessarily traditional. So whether it's the Winter Room or the Senior Exhibition research project, or whether it's getting kids out of the classroom, whether it's the beauty and the kind of natural habitats on our campus and surrounding our campus, and getting students to appreciate the aspects, some of the non-traditional aspects of Heathwood that I think really kind of turn on the light in many of our students. And often when you ask a alum, what is that thing that was most significant in their experience? It's often Winter Room, Senior Exhibition, I learned to write, or I had an adult that believed in me. And those are those things that ring true. And so I always try to remember that as we have conversations about accepting a student, or if we have conversations with division heads about how we're going to approach curriculum.
Thank you. So we talked a little bit about just some of maybe the talking points that our alumni could use out in the community when talking to maybe potentially prospective families. But can we talk a little bit now about how our alumni could sort of help support the administration, the teachers, sort of in creating this diverse environment and really having genuine opportunities to network with a variety of different communities.
Yeah, I think, so first off, I want to say that I am, and I say I, along with the DEI committee, we're super excited about our alums' desire to support us and to help us in this work, and greatly appreciate the feedback that we've gotten so far. One of the things that I think would be very helpful if alums are local, certainly as the opportunity presents itself to come out and meet with or speak with students, and of course with technology now, it doesn't really matter if an alum is out in California or in New York or wherever. The opportunity to zoom in to a science class or a history class or social studies class, and share not only about your experience at Heathwood, but your experiences beyond Heathwood and your expertise in a particular area. Serving as sort of a guest lecturer, if you will, for a class or for a particular unit of a class. I think that would be a tremendous help, and I think also it models. I mean, for our current students to be able to see alums share their story, whether that's in person or virtually, it really models for our current students really what they can become. To hear stories of alums that have may have struggled or not, but have finished Heathwood, gone on to college, perhaps graduate school or professional school, and is successful. I think, for a ninth grader or 10th grader who's wondering how they're going to get through the next 2 or 3 years, to be able to see that and to hear someone who say, 8 years ago, I had my doubts or I had my struggles. I think it could be extremely inspiring. And so we would welcome, again, be that in person or virtually, opportunities for alums to come back and again, if not speaking to a particular division, then certainly some classroom experiences that I think could be very rich.
Yeah, I think Willis has really covered the bases there. Any involvement you can have coming back for career day, reaching out to Stacy Gross. If you are in an interesting career or maybe a career we don't traditionally hear from, speaking to students just about your career and what it is that you love about what you do would be a great way for students to see different faces presenting on career day.
Yeah.
I think to provide narratives, I think we want to continue to provide narratives to our faculty and our administration that challenge this perspective that it's either all good or all bad, that things could be mostly good and there could still have been rough patches for which Heathwood may have either steeled you from those experiences or may have played a role in some of those unfortunate experiences, helps us grow. In public, though, I think which most helps us is to talk about how Heathwood was transformational and how it might be transformational for a family that looks at us quickly and sees that we're 80% white and 20% African American and questions whether that would be the right change. To share those stories about what has been transformational and how it played a role in the trajectory of your life are ways that Heathwood will have more students, will have a more diverse student body, and will ultimately be kind of a more successful school. Those would be huge pieces of impact. And we often hear questions about financial aid and scholarships from some of our alums. And just to help you all understand how that works at a school, often schools, if they have dollars in an endowment, often draw off 5% of that endowment to support scholarships. So for example, if Heathwood had a $1 million endowment that was earmarked for minority scholarships or specific types of financial aid packages, that would only spin off $50,000. And so very often at the moment, because Heathwood is not a school with a large endowment, as many of the schools in South Carolina do not have huge endowments. When we look at financial aid, it's not revenue that's being replaced by endowment spin. It's actually just lost revenue. It's revenue we're not collecting. And so for Heathwood to both be a financially sustainable school and entertain larger financial aid packages presents a kind of financial conflict that schools can slowly move toward change, but it makes it difficult to change quickly. But again, I would reinforce what Willis said. The more involved you can be, talking to the Accept Club, sharing narratives with faculty, but also emailing or calling us up with suggestions and questions, and helping us move the needle behind the scenes, but in public, helping to be a cheerleader for Heathwood will help us be a stronger school.
Yeah. Thank you, Willis and Chris. Thank you to all our alumni for joining us tonight. We've had such a great conversations. Hopefully we've shared all the things we are thinking about, talking about, and intentionally working on this year. If there wasn't a question that we answered or more questions that have been brought up for you, please always feel free to reach out to myself, to Willis, or to Chris. We will be happy to have a further conversation, email. I'd also like to encourage you to make sure you like our Heathwood Alumni Facebook page, like our Instagram page. Please make sure you go to the website and update your contact information, because we want to make sure you're getting all the updated news and exciting things that are happening at Heathwood. I also would like to encourage you, if you're interested in being on the Alumni Council and sort of guiding some of these behind the scenes conversations and working on some strategic goals, to please reach out to me and let me know that might be something that you are interested in. So thank you again, Chris and Willis. Brianna, thank you for your help on the committee and arranging this conversation, and to the behind-the-scenes technical people that connected all of us tonight to you all, as we're all in 3 separate places. And I will just hand it over if either of y'all have anything to say before we say goodbye, and stay safe.
Well, it's all you go first.
Yeah. I was just going to say to our alums, thank you all who have provided us with feedback back in June and beyond. We appreciate the feedback, and I really want you to know sincerely, to make progress in this area, we need your support, and we look forward to partnering with you and working with you in the coming months and years, so that Heathwood can become a richer experience, or provide a richer experience for all of our students.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank Willis and the diversity committee for all their hard work. We've definitely, made some ground in the last couple months, and I thought we were in a very good place and have been so pleased with the movement we've made. But we are in an interesting period in our country's history where important, difficult topics are being brought to the forefront more than they have in the past. And it's a difficult political climate, some would say toxic. And as we move forward at a school, we're often trying to focus on having the kids free of distraction and focused on their development. And as a school with 2-year-olds through 12th graders, the great majority of our kids are quite young. And so that's one aspect. But then as our students get older, they are ready for these deeper conversations that involve respect for others, but also are difficult because assumptions we've made for many, many decades and centuries have often been misplaced, or they just have never come up. People have never sometimes had to examine any of these topics. People who look like me have had the luxury of not having to examine those topics. And then there are a large number of people in this country who have not had that luxury. And so Heathwood's well positioned. We are a soulful school. We are an Episcopal school. I work with amazing colleagues. My faculty have blown me away dealing with COVID. And even while they're doing that, they're ready to rise to the challenge of having difficult discussions about race. So I appreciate the support of our alums. I have really loved my 8 years as we start my 8th year at Heathwood. It is an amazing school, and please do not hesitate to reach out to me if you ever have questions or observations.
Thank you all both. Thanks for a great conversation. And again, thank you to all our alumni. I look forward to getting to know each of you more. And please reach out to me and make sure we stay connected. Good night.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Good night.